Hello, my name is Sadie Moen, and I am with Tammy Jo Taft today from AE2S, and we are doing our interview on the diversion. So, Tammy Jo, will you explain yourself, what you do, and who you are?
Sure. Okay, so I'm Tammy Jo Anderson Taft, and I've worked at AE2S for 4 years. Before that, I was a newspaper reporter, and I worked as a public information officer for EPA for a while. And then I used to feed sharks in an aquarium for a random fact if you needed one. Anyways, but now I work mostly on public education and outreach. And I do a lot of writing, videos, press contacts and information, and that kind of thing, website design. And focus on the Diversion Project mostly.
So a lot of people don't know exactly what the Diversion Project is. Can you kind of sum it up in a short little explanation of what
Sure.
the project is?
Yep. So the FM Diversion Project is a project that includes a southern embankment and a 30-mile long channel that protects the Fargo-Moorhead area from catastrophic flooding.
So what type of need, like safety, psychological, environmental, is the diversion?
I would probably say the diversion meets a few needs. It probably meets the safety need in the most basic sense that, a flood really puts a lot of people at risk. And often the people who are most impacted by a flood are people who are vulnerable. So for example, during the 2009 flood, a lot of folks that had to be evacuated were medically either at a disadvantage. Maybe a lot of the nursing homes had to be evacuated, and moving folks that are not in the best of health is very hard on them. You've got a lot of safety issues with like kids doing sandbags. There's a lot of safety issues with that. And then also sandbags are not necessarily the best form of flood protection because they're an emergency measure. So anytime you can not use emergency measures and have something permanent, it just improves the safety of everyone. And so the diversion definitely meets a safety need. It protects 230,000 people from catastrophic flooding. It protects their jobs. It protects their homes. It protects the streets and infrastructure. It also probably meets that physiological need because a lot of people come to Fargo to get their food. A lot of people come here for medical services. There's a lot of basic care things that Fargo-Moorhead community provides that people from all around the state come here for.
So many people believe that as a consumer you need to be buying an item, but the diversion is not just buying an item, it's protection to all your items, as in cars, houses, pets, everything you talked about. So how would you describe the diversion to someone as if they were buying a product at the store?
Well, technically people are buying the diversion because people, when you buy anything in Fargo-Moorhead, there's a sales tax on it, and that sales tax goes to help pay for the project. And so taxpayers are buying the diversion project because they're investing in their own safety. And so the reason why taxpayers approve that is because they recognize that the benefits of having something permanent outweigh the cost that they're putting towards it. So people are technically buying the diversion project. And I always think, as I'm a rural Cass County resident, and I don't pay taxes in the city of Fargo on property, but I'm helped buying the diversion too. Every time I buy groceries in Fargo, I'm helping pay for this project. And it's worth it to me because this is where I go to the doctor. This is where I work every day. This is where I fly from. And so there's a lot of benefits to me. So I'm willing to buy this product, which is permanent protection.
So how do you try to make a positive attitude about the diversion through the communication sources you use? So what do you try to explain to the community, to ease their risk factors,
Sure.
to try to put a better attitude towards it than negative media?
Yep. Well, the number one thing that is important about the diversion is for people to have the correct facts. And the facts are that Fargo and Moorhead are at flood risk. There's a real possibility that the cities could be really devastated by a massive flood. And emergency measures just don't cut it. They have cut it in the past, but there is definitely science that says in the future, it's very probable that a huge flood could come and really impact the city. And so when people have the facts about flooding risk and what's possible for protection, that affects attitude and that affects how people feel about it, because nobody wants to put their family at risk, and if you have the opportunity to build something and invest in something that's going to reduce the risk for your family and protect your property, then lots of times people will support that.
So how do you expose customers to like Twitter and YouTube? How do you get the name out there so they know that
Sure.
it's available to them?
So we use Twitter a lot because it's a platform that is a little bit more news-centric. And with a project like this, we have a lot of news happening. We have a lot of federal partners that come to town. We've got a lot of support from the state of North Dakota and a lot of things that happen locally that are news-specific. It's not necessarily, I guess, it's a lot more content-heavy. And so we have found that Twitter is a better platform for us. We do individual email newsletters. Those get sent out at least once a month. We work with the city of Fargo and various county resources to reach out to their customers. We put videos on the city of Fargo's public access, and we use YouTube quite a bit as well. So we have a lot of educational videos that explain certain parameters of the project. And that's what I said about having the facts. Like, some of those videos really explain some of those facts in a simple way. And that's been really helpful, because then when you're speaking to somebody who doesn't have all the facts, you can show them a YouTube video that explains it and help them understand a complex item like cubic feet per second at the Fargo gauge.
So something that customers have to think about is post-decision regret. So after buying a product, they might regret it, and it might be like, why did I do this? So one of the biggest worries is the diversion really going to work and protect us like they say it is? So how are you trying to help ease like post-decision regret in the Fargo-Moorhead area?
Sure. Well, the project's not built yet, so I would say the regret is not necessarily, it hasn't happened yet because we haven't seen the project in operation. I will say that we have a really excellent example to the north of Fargo and Winnipeg, and they use at least 5 diversions to take water and prevent it from getting into the city and causing flood impacts up there. So we know diversions work, and we have so many engineers working on this project that there's no way that it will not work. And the reality is that, a drainage ditch is not necessarily the most difficult thing to engineer, but this project is very complex. There's a lot of other things that go on with it. You've got the embankments, you've got the river crossings with aqueducts, you've got different spillways that go into it, you've got different gated river structures that go into it. And so it will work because it's worked in other communities, and it's not necessarily a revolutionary design, but there is definitely going to be a little bit of, once it gets up and is operating, we're going to learn as we go on some of the operations. We're not going to know exactly how to do it from the first day. They're going to have a good idea and have an operating plan, but as with any infrastructure project, you kind of, once you see it in operation, you can improve things. And I think that buyer's regret, if we do not get any more floods ever, that would be the only way that there would be regret about a project happening. But all of the data about the climate and about recent flooding situations, that's very, very, very unlikely. And so the first time that the project works and operates, I think it will be hard for anyone in the community to regret that it's been built.
So do you think customers will be satisfied with the diversion when it's complete? And for now, what are we trying to do to reassure them that this is the right project to do?
Sure. So we do a lot of education every single day, because the diversion with the plan that they have is the plan that's been permitted by the state of North Dakota and the state of Minnesota. That is what is going to be built. So in terms of convincing people that it's the right plan, people elect governments, and governments put their agencies into place, and those agencies are required to look at different plans and permit what's the best choice. And so both the state of North Dakota and Minnesota have said that this particular plan is the correct choice. So I think it's a constant ongoing effort because there's so many people that are paying for this and are affected by it. We have to constantly be talking to people that are at all different stages of understanding. You've got people that have never bought into it and don't know anything about it. And then you've got people that have been hearing about it for 15 years and are still, operating with a set of facts from 2010. And so we have to work every day to make sure that if people are looking for updated, correct information, that it's easy to find. That's one thing about having a website that's really dynamic and easy to look through, is so that anybody coming to the project with questions can find those answers quickly.
So how is the diversion a relative advantage compared to in-town leaves or sandbags?
So the city of Fargo is built in the bottom of a lake bed and is so flat. It's just like the it's so flat and so low. And so that if water is going to congregate, that's where it's going to flow to. There's not an option to build in-town levees and sandbags high enough to protect the city if we get a larger flood than 2009. And so most people agree that there probably is a larger flood coming. It's not, when, it's kind of when it's going to happen. It's not if, it's when it's going to happen. So if we know that you cannot build in-town levees high enough because there's no place to tie in to keep the water out, then you have to look at your other engineering options. And your other engineering options are to put the water into a ditch that goes around the area you're trying to protect. And so one of the reasons that's incorporated is because it's worked in other communities. But part of the diversion project is the embankment to the south that holds water south of town, and then the diversion channel that diverts that water around town. But also, when the project operates, there's going to be 37 feet of water flowing through town in the natural river channel, which is a ton of water. And so that's flood level waters as well. And so the project does incorporate in-town levees as well. They've built new flood walls all throughout the town and new levees all throughout the town to prepare for 37 feet of water through town.
So going back to the uncertainty with the project, farmers are really impacted by this project. So how are we trying to reassure them that this will help their farms and be the correct thing also for people outside of town?
Sure. So people are impacted by the diversion project in different ways. Definitely have people that are that their land is required because it's underneath the footprint of the project, and those properties are being purchased outright. And so you feel for those people that that property will never again be farmland, and because it's going to be under the diversion channel or under the embankment or that kind of thing. So the properties south of town, those will be impacted because water will be stored there whenever the project operates. So the most important thing about that is that there is a mitigation plan that they're working on, and the mitigation plan will figure out what is the impact worth, and figure out a structure for compensating people that are impacted by the project. There's also people that have homes down there, and there's an ongoing process to work with folks that are in that impacted area, because if you're going to store water in a spot, you have to move the folks that are living there. You cannot put them in harm's way like that. And it's really sad, but it's also necessary. Like, this project has been reviewed and it is necessary. And so it's a required outcome a little bit. So anyways, with the land where the mitigation plan outlines where the water is going to be stored, that land will still be farmable, and the diversion project will only operate so infrequently that on almost every single year that land will be farmed like nothing different. And so even this spring, without the diversion project, everything was so wet that a lot of things were delayed naturally anyways. And so that land will continue to be farmed. So that's good because it'll retain some of that ag economy for that part of the county. So, yeah, it's tricky though for them to figure out, okay, what's the correct level of compensation for impacts? How do you help people be whole after a project comes through and impacts them and their family? And it's hard for people.
So, where would you say the majority of the community is right now on their attitudes towards the diversion? Are they more positive, negative, or are people still really unsure?
I think it depends on how much they know about it. I think it depends on how much they're impacted by it. And I think it depends on how much history they have with it. So the project has changed a lot since it was first kind of starting to be designed in 2009. And so if people are still operating under information from 2009, they're going to have a different idea than they maybe would if they had all the correct information. So I would say a lot of folks do a good job about keeping themselves informed. And I guess it's hard to say. There's definitely vocal opposition to the project. And, you know, what big project has ever not had vocal opposition? But there's definitely a lot of folks that recognize that the need exists, and it's smarter to build permanent protection than it is to rely on emergency measures. And especially if those emergency measures fail and you lose everything, the impact of a catastrophically flooded Fargo-Moorhead would be just so hard to think about. The impact of that is a real game changer when it comes to people's attitudes, I think.
So how are you trying to help change the negative attitudes with people who are just really stubborn? Are you trying to still give them facts, or are you just kind of letting them be negative about it?
Well, there's some folks, the people that I've run into that are really vocal opposition to it. There's some folks that are opposed to it on all levels. There's some folks who are opposed to it because they don't think it'll work. They think the engineering is incorrect. And then there's other folks that are opposed to it because they don't want to pay for it. And so the way that I approach it is that we have to figure out which of those is true. Do they hate all of it? Do they just hate the design of it? Or do they just hate that we have to pay for it? Which of those is true, and how do you have a conversation about that? So we do a lot of like face-to-face presentations about it. We try to make sure that everything on the website is easy to find about those particular topics. If the project's going to work on an engineering level, how is it paid for? Try to make sure that there's maps available of the project so people know where it's going to be impacting people. And sometimes you have folks that there's literally nothing you can provide them with that will change their opinion if their opinion is set in stone. And folks like that, there's enough other folks out there that don't know enough about the project that, given the fact that our job is to inform everyone, on some level, you've got to kind of cut your losses and say, okay, well, you know, we've got a whole new crop of college students. What are we doing to reach out to them?
So you mentioned that the project constantly keeps changing, like the design and different things on it. So do you think as technology keeps changing over the next couple of years, do you think the design of the project will also keep changing, or new things will be implemented into the design to help make it even better than it was originally?
So some parts of the project have not changed at all. So like the southern embankment is a big pile of dirt, and that is what people have used to protect themselves for flooding since the beginning of time. You know, that's what everybody uses around their houses. They put a little ring dike around their house to keep water out. So something like that doesn't change. And a drainage ditch like the diversion channel, that doesn't change. That's a known tool that people have used for ages to keep water out of devastating places, right? The things that have changed and have changed on the project is they have better technology to anticipate where water goes, how water will react. Because if you look at Fargo-Moorhead, not only do we have like the flattest place on the planet, but also you've got weather is a huge factor up here. You know, you've got possible ice storms, you've got snow that happens or rain that happens, and you've got such a drainage area, and water from the entire drainage area can affect the rivers, you know, from days away, and it all can show up at the same time. And so the fact that they have better modeling, and they have better tools to kind of anticipate that, I think that will change, and it will be, it will make things more accurate so that they can confirm that things will operate the way that they're supposed to protect people. Because the worst thing would be to build something that's permanent and then not have it work. And so I think the tools are getting better to ensure that whatever is built, when it is operated, that it does provide that protection that is needed.
So as technology also changes with outreach and websites and different social media popping up,
Yep.
do you think that you will kind of change like content and like try to add to more sites or where more people present themselves? Like say Facebook is slowly dying for younger generations.
Sure.
So Twitter is still very popular among younger, but maybe not older. So is there a
Yep.
way that you're trying to find to outreach to all levels of the community?
Sure. Yeah, I think we will continue to have a multi-pronged sustained effort to reach as many members of the community as possible. So because this project is funded by the public, and because it's a partnership between the city of Fargo and Cass County and the city of Moorhead and Clay County, the counties and cities have tools available to them to reach their citizens. So that's a benefit to the project, that the project can provide information to those entities, and then they can send them out to their citizens, because people pay attention when their tax is on the line. I do think that, even in the past 20 years since I've been working, the number of ways to reach people has diversified, but it's not necessarily grown in impact. There's different ways to reach people, but instead of placing one ad in the paper in the 50s, now you can place 5 ads on 5 different platforms now, and maybe you're reaching the same number of people, but you're in 5 different places. So I think we'll need to continue to figure out, okay, what makes the most sense for using tax dollars to get information out there, and how front and center do you need this to be? Obviously, when the diversion's being built, there's going to be impacts to traffic. That's pretty important. So how do we, in a very smart way, get information about traffic patterns to people that want to know,
So what is one thing that you'd want someone who's listening to take away from this if they knew nothing about the diversion before listening to this?
Sure. I would say check out the website, look a little bit at the history timeline so that you can see how much research has gone into a project like this, because nobody undertakes a $2.2 billion project without researching all the options out there. And I would also take a look at where you want your taxpayer money to go. If you build the diversion project and it's in place permanently, you really don't ever have to think about it again. It's built and it's ready to go. Do you want to constantly be paying taxes to be filling sandbags for the rest of your known life? Or would you rather buy it once, be done with it, and then use your tax money for something other than sandbags?
So what is your website where they can go and look for more information?
fmdiversion.gov, or you can follow us on Twitter, which is twitter.com/fmdiversion. And then I would also, take a look at our YouTube page, which is /fmdiversion. There's a lot of videos on there that kind of break down some of the complex parts of the project. And, this project is so big and so expensive, and it's got so many parts to it that it's really hard to wrap your head around the whole thing. And so I'd say start small. Pick one thing you want to learn about. Do you want to learn about past floods? Or do you want to learn about how it's being financed? Or do you want to learn about, where it's going to be or how it's going to make an impact? Just pick one question that you have and find the answer to it, and then move on.
Well, thank you for taking the time to go through this with me, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.